I only borrowed your card for groceries, my brother told me, flashing that charming, innocent smile he'd used his entire life to get out of trouble. I wanted to trust him, so I handed it over. But by the next morning, exactly $7,650 was completely gone from my account. When I confronted my dad hoping for support, he just shrugged and said, "He's family. He needs help." Don't be cruel. They thought I would just take the hit. They thought I'd stay quiet to keep the peace. But they forgot one thing. I managed the family's logistics for a living. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. Instead, that very night, I made one quiet, calculated move. At exactly 7:35 a.m. the next morning, the panic started. My brother opened his banking app, and he screamed so loud the neighbors heard it. "My name is Emma. I am 29 years old and I work as a senior financial auditor in the heart of Chicago. In my line of work, numbers never lie and patterns always reveal exactly who a person truly is. Unfortunately, I spent years ignoring the glaring patterns of my younger brother, Ethan. To my father, Ethan was the golden boy who could do absolutely no wrong, an entrepreneurial genius whose constant business failures were always just a stroke of bad luck. It was a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Ethan cornered me in the kitchen, looking unusually desperate. He claimed his commercial checking account was temporarily frozen due to a banking glitch, leaving him unable to buy basic groceries or pay his utility bill. He begged to borrow my debit card for just a few hours. Before we reveal how his little favor turned into a total nightmare, I want to see how far my story has reached. Please take a second to comment below with the city or country you are watching this video from right now. Seeing him look so defeated, I let my guard down, handed him the card, and told him to only use it for absolute essentials. I completely ignored the slight smirk that crossed his face as his fingers wrapped around the plastic. I went to bed that night genuinely believing I had helped my brother out of a minor, stressful jam. I had absolutely no idea that Ethan had been waiting for months to get his hands on my information, or that my generosity was about to cost me everything. The morning sun was barely filtering through the blinds when my eyes snapped open at exactly 7:34 a.m. My phone sitting on the nightstand was vibrating so intensely it was practically sliding off the wood. A relentless barrage of text alerts was lighting up the screen in rapid succession. Half awake, I reached over and unlocked the device, expecting a sudden work emergency or a server crash at the office. Instead, my heart stopped. The screen was filled with fraud alerts and push notifications from my banking app. I rubbed my eyes, staring at the numbers in utter disbelief. $1,000 transferred via an online payment app, $2,500 spent at a high-end electronics retailer, another $3,000 wired directly to a private holding company. The transactions kept rolling in, a cold, systematic execution of theft. By the time the final notification blinked onto the screen, a staggering $7,650 had been entirely drained from my primary checking account. A wave of intense nausea hit me instantly, and a cold sweat broke out across my forehead. That money wasn't just disposable income. It was my hard-earned savings, meant for my upcoming mortgage down payment. My fingers shook so violently, I could barely navigate the app to lock down the card. The familiar sinking feeling of absolute betrayal washed over me as the truth settled heavily in my chest. It wasn't a random hacker or a digital identity thief who had done this to me. It was Ethan. I didn't waste a single second. I threw on a robe, marched down the hallway, and confronted Ethan right in the living room. He was sitting on the couch casually scrolling through his phone. When I demanded to know why he had drained $7,650 from my account, he didn't even flinch. He just rolled his eyes and told me it was a time-sensitive investment opportunity for his startup, promising he would pay me back tenfold within a month. Before I could even process his delusion, our father walked into the room. I turned to him, expecting him to be just as furious as I was. But as soon as Ethan started spinning his usual soba story about needing a break to make his business succeed, my dad's expression softened. He turned to me, sighed heavily, and shrugged his shoulders. He's family, Emma. He's your younger brother, and he needs help to get on his feet. Don't be so cold and cruel over a little bit of money. Hearing those words made my blood run entirely cold. I wasn't just dealing with a thief. I was dealing with a toxic system of total enablement. Before we get to the quiet move that changed everything, I want to ask you a serious question. Would you ever forgive a sibling if they stole this much money from you and your parents took their side? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one of them. I realized right then that screaming at them would accomplish absolutely nothing. They wanted me to blow up, so they could label me as the dramatic, emotional one. I forced my breathing to slow down, turned around without saying another word, and walked back to my room, locking the door behind me. My father and brother probably thought my silence meant defeat. They thought I was just going to swallow the loss and move on to keep the family peace, but they forgot exactly what I do for a living. I opened my laptop, booted up my secure network connection, and began doing what I do best, auditing. I knew Ethan's financial history better than anyone, and I knew he was incredibly sloppy with his paperwork. I spent the next 3 hours quietly digging through my personal digital banking archives and old tax registries. That was when I uncovered the massive oversight Ethan had made. 2 years ago, when Ethan had tried to launch his first commercial transport venture, our father had insisted I help him set up his initial banking infrastructure. Because Ethan's credit was completely ruined back then, I had reluctantly agreed to be listed as the primary legal owner on a secondary dual-purpose asset management account to help him secure authorization. Over the years, I had completely forgotten about it, assuming he had transferred it. But as I stared at the official bank registry on my screen, the data revealed something incredible. Not only was my name still legally attached as the primary owner, but Ethan had recently tied all of his current personal business ventures, his vendor payout systems, and even his luxury car loan authorizations directly to this exact account. The clock struck midnight as I sat in the absolute silence of my bedroom, the harsh blue light of my laptop screen illuminating the room. Ethan and my father were probably fast asleep, completely confident that they had successfully handled me. They had no idea that Ethan's arrogance had left a massive, glaring vulnerability in his financial house of cards. Because I was still listed as the primary legal owner of that asset management account, I possessed full unilateral authority to modify its structure without his consent. I took a deep breath and clicked into the account portal, my fingers moving with deliberate professional precision. I didn't hesitate. First, I initiated a secure digital freeze on all secondary authorized cards tied to the account, immediately cutting off his daily spending power. Next, I systematically detached my name, my credit profile, and my social security number from his active business registration, shielding myself from any future legal liability. Finally, I executed the most important part of my quiet move. Using my legal rights as the primary holder, I initiated an internal bank transfer to reallocate exactly $7,650 back into my personal checking account, perfectly recovering the exact sum he had stolen from me. This move automatically triggered a massive deficiency balance on his side, effectively locking Ethan completely out of his remaining capital. I knew for a fact that his major business vendors and premium luxury car lenders processed their automatic monthly payments early every single morning. By draining his available buffer and locking the account, his next processing cycle was guaranteed to fail spectacularly. I closed my laptop in total silence, laid my head on the pillow, and waited for morning. The clock on my nightstand ticked closer and closer to morning. I sat quietly at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee, watching the minutes roll by. When the clock finally hit exactly 7:35 a.m., the synchronization servers went live and the panic started. Right on cue, a sudden, piercing shout shattered the morning silence. Ethan had just opened his banking app, and he screamed so loud that I'm certain the neighbors across the street heard it. Seconds later, He came sprinting down the hallway in his pajamas, his face completely pale and his hands shaking as he clutched his phone. His banking app was flashing red, with critical failure notifications. Because of my quiet move the night before, his automated morning processing cycle had turned into a total disaster. The automatic payments for his premium luxury car loan had just defaulted, triggering an instant notification that his vehicle was now flagged for immediate repossession. Even worse, his primary business vendors had tried to pull their monthly payments, only to find the asset account completely locked down and drained of its buffer. Ethan was utterly frantic, hyperventilating, as he realized his entire financial house of cards had completely collapsed in a matter of seconds. He looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of rage and sheer terror. Finally realizing that the quiet sister he had so casually exploited had completely outmaneuvered him without uttering a single word. My father came rushing into the kitchen right behind him, demanded to know what was happening, and immediately started yelling at me when he realized what I had done. But I didn't care anymore. While they were busy shouting and panicking over failed processing cycles, I calmly walked back to my room, packed up the last of my bags, and prepared to leave that toxic household for good. I looked my father straight in the eye and told him that if Ethan ever tried to touch my information again, the next call wouldn't be to the bank. It would be to the police with full audit documentation. 6 months have passed since that morning. I moved into a beautiful apartment of my own, and my credit is completely secure. Ethan's luxury car was repossessed 3 weeks after that incident, and his sham business completely folded due to the vendor defaults. My father had to dip into his own retirement savings just to bail him out of his remaining debts. They tried calling me to ask for financial help, but I blocked both of their numbers and never looked back. Now that you've heard my entire story, I'm genuinely curious about your perspective. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have made that same quiet move, or would you have handled it differently? Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to Heartstone Lane. Thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next interesting and educational stories.